Good morning, students. Hope you continue to be well and safe. In our last class, we were discussing Muhammad and some introductory facts about Islam, and that Muhammad, over a period of many years, claimed to receive revelations which he recited to others, which will ultimately become the Quran. Well, as we think about his new religion, his first convert is his wife. And as he begins to develop this religion, his converts mainly come from the lower and poorer classes in Mecca. And there is a lot of opposition that rises from the older, richer, established clan leaders of that city. And so about 615, 15 Muslim families are going to flee Mecca and take up residence in the Christian kingdom of what is Ethiopia today. And they are going to develop into a clan themselves as a result of this. Now, in 619, his wife dies, and Muhammad will turn around and marry the first of a number of women that he will wind up marrying in the course of the rest of his life. But early on, his religion was by no means widely accepted. At first, he tried to get along with both Jews and Christians. In fact, early on, his followers were told to pray toward Jerusalem. But as divisions between them and opposition between them and the Jews became greater, he commanded his disciples to start praying toward Mecca instead. And so many of his followers will, quite honestly, join in the traditions, the way of life of the typical Arab people of that time. They will raid various caravans, and in their thinking, that was not a dishonorable thing. And it was a way of taking vengeance on the Meccans who had not accepted Muhammad and his religion. And so conflict is going to grow and grow. And finally, in 630, Muhammad, with about 10,000 followers then, will conquer the city of Mecca. And in doing so, and in trying to purge the city of its idolatry, he will pretty much become a major leader among the Arab people. He will invite people to join his religion. He will invite tribes to join his religion. He will use diplomacy, and he will use armed might, warfare, to spread his religion. But unfortunately, he made no arrangements for a successor, and so there's going to be a little bit of confusion over that. But conquest early on becomes a feature of the Islamic religion. Okay, let's talk about the Quran a little bit. Literally means reading or recitation, and it is believed to be Allah's last word to humanity. To them, it completes the Old and New Testaments. As we look at it, It is honestly a collection of piecemeal statements given over 20 years. Muslims consider it to be the very words of Allah. And the messages were supposedly taken from a heavenly book. And when Muslims read it, they read it very literally. In fact, when a Muslim child is born, the very first thing they're going to hear are selections from the Quran. Selections from the Quran are going to be written on the walls of their homes for decoration. So they are going to be, shall I say, indoctrinated with this book from very early on in their lives. Now, the collection is made up of 114 chapters. They are called surahs. They tend to have no topical or chronological arrangement whatsoever. As I said earlier, they're just kind of piecemeal. They're kind of thrown in there together and so on. And each copy, physical copy of the book is paid extraordinary reverence. It is their highest authority. And to in any way desecrate a Quran would be considered one of the ultimate sins that an individual could commit in this lifetime. Now, the Jews also tend to hold their scriptures and cherish them very much as well. And so this may be an attitude that the early Muslims borrowed from the Jews, that great reverence and respect for their particular book. Let me give you some examples of the titles of some of these surahs. The second one, the cow. The fourth one, the women. The sixth one, the cattle. The eighth one, the spoils of war. Think about that one. The 13th one, the thunder. The 15th one, the rock. The 18th one, the cave. You have one entitled the star. You even have one entitled the divorce. And so all kinds of different titles, different ideas thrown in there. And for example, number 4, the one on women, women are not the only thing discussed in there. There are some passages that have direct reference to them, and hopefully, if we have time, we'll look at some of those. But the whole chapter does not deal just simply with that. So, where the polytheists of Mecca before its conquer and the Byzantine Christians, they have a debate over what part Jesus played in the Godhead. The Muslims are going to solve that problem for themselves. There is only one God, and Allah is his name. And so, to Muslims, the Godhead, as we think of it in Christianity, would be considered polytheism to them. And as we said earlier, it appears that Allah was actually the moon god that kind of gets promoted to become Muhammad's chief god in his religion. Now, though Allah is the only God figure in Islam, he does have heavenly figures. According to the Quran, God has warriors that fight on the side of believers. And there is a creation of beings that is halfway between Allah and humans called jinn. We generally refer to them as angels. And there are even guardian angels and demons. And so some of these ideas possibly came from Zoroastrianism. Some of these ideas possibly came from the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. So Islam can be said to be a religion that incorporates a whole lot of ideas from a whole lot of religions that preceded it historically. Okay, so as we think about Islam, it is a religion that says righteous people win the favor of Allah by submission. And that is the key understanding of anything that goes on in Islam. It is a religion of submission. Now, Islam teaches free will. It teaches that people can choose. And so, like many of the religions we have already covered in our study this semester, we see that Islam does realize there are some people that will choose that way, and there are some people that will not choose that way. And of course, they have the idea that judgment will take place at the end of time. Those who have been faithful and submissive will be rewarded. Everyone else will be punished as a result of what they have done. Now, they have many terms for non-Muslims, but non-believers is generally the term most often used to describe those people that do not accept the Muslim religion. Now, something I think they definitely borrowed from Zoroastrianism is the idea of heaven to Muslims is a park, paradise. That is a Zoroastrian idea for sure. And realize Zoroastrianism was a Persian religion, so it was an pre-Arab religion for sure. And so it is a park. On the other hand, Muslim hell is a place filled with scalding winds, black smoke, brackish waters, and so on. By the way, in heaven, men will have all kinds of wonderful delights. Notice how I worded that. Men will have all kinds of wonderful delights, especially those who die defending or spreading or whatever the Muslim religion. Okay, their worship is carried out in a variety of places. Now, the Muslims have decreed Friday to be their special day. So you have Muslim worship on Friday, Jewish worship on Saturday, Christian worship on Sunday. And so they chose a day different from the previous two religions. And yet, Friday is, unlike the Jews, a day of rest, but it is the day of the week that the Muslim is required to pray at a mosque with fellow Muslims. Now, the service at the mosque will also include a sermon, and it can be in either Arabic or it can be in the vernacular language of the people. Now, mosques usually serve as schools and libraries. Many Jewish synagogues do the very same thing. But if you will notice, anytime you see a Muslim building, it will always be topped by a crescent moon. And as I said, this is something that many believe is that Allah was borrowed from the moon god, and this is why this particular symbol has remained strong among the Muslims. Okay, Islam has 5 pillars. These are the must-do things if you are going to be a good Muslim. These are not optional by any stretch of the imagination. These are uniform, they are regular, and they go across the Muslim world. Number 1, repetition of the creed. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This is something they're going to repeat over and over. In fact, probably the first thing a child hears, probably the last thing many adults will hear before they die. This statement is normally made as often as possible every day. So this is very, very, very important to them. Okay, secondly, we have daily prayer. And the Muslim is to pray 5 times a day, each time facing toward Mecca. Those are at dawn, midday, mid-afternoon, sunset, and nightfall. And if you are in an area where there are Muslim businesses, they will literally shut down for a time during the periods of prayer. And you may have seen scenes where you hear somebody shouting over a loudspeaker and reciting things in Muslim cities. These are the calls to prayer. So, normally they're going to prostrate themselves on the ground. And as I say, they're going to be facing toward Mecca as they pray. Number 3, we have almsgiving. Now, Muslims are expected to share their possessions with the poor. And charity, as it is generally called, is obligated. It's not optional. You're supposed to do so. And they will be assessed a tax somewhere between 2.5% to 10% of their wealth as a part of almsgiving. Of course, the Jews tend to give what is called the tithe, the tenth, and so perhaps this is something they borrowed from the Jews. But they consider doing this so they can receive, in turn, blessings from God. Number 4 are fasts. Now, Judaism has fasting. There are some Christians who practice fasting. So this is not a unique thing that is only Islamic in its idea. During the month of Ramadan, though, Muslims are expected to abstain from eating, drinking, smoking, or anything else during the daylight hours. Now, once it's sundown, they can have a meal or they can whatever. But during the daytime, they are to abstain from all things. And this is something that is considered very, very important to them. And then number 5 is the pilgrimage. And this is the goal, to be able to go to Mecca and join masses of people as they march around in the city of Mecca, where Islam got its initial start. And so this is considered something that, if it is at all possible, at least once in a lifetime, someone needs to be able to make this trip. Now, there are some who add a 6th pillar. We will talk about this a little more in our last lecture, but the 6th pillar for some is jihad, holy war. They figure that anyone who opposes Islam in any way, we're not necessarily talking about physical persecution, people who speak against Islam and whatever, that they are an enemy. And Muslims have the right, and many believe the obligation, to attack, take vengeance on, or whatever. And so this is a part of Islam, and when we read out of the Quran, we will read some of the passages that stress this. All right, let's talk about Islam and women. The position of women in Arabia before Islam was very low. A woman was considered to be property. She was owned by her father, her husband, a brother. If she didn't have a father or brother or husband, she could be owned by a cousin, an uncle, whatever. In other words, women were to be under the authority of a male. And when Islam comes along, it is emphasized that women are expected to be subordinate to their fathers, brothers, and husbands. They are not considered to be socially independent individuals. In fact, there are some Muslim countries that have what are called honor killings, where if a young woman is not subordinate, she will actually be taken out by her own family and executed. This is where families will, shall we say, murder rebellious daughters who do not submit. And it is estimated that there were more than 5,000 of these honor killings in the year 2011 alone. So it's not a practice that is regulated way, way, way to the past. Now, in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, women are required to conform to very strict dress regulations and public behavior. They are told the only way they expose their beauty is to their husbands. And so sometimes many of them will wear the veil, and of course that is not just a Muslim tradition. Veils existed in the ancient world long before the Muslims ever came along. It is just something that has become very much a part of women's attire. Now, in some nations, for example, Women can wear the veil. They'll wear fairly common dress for other people in that nation. In fact, young Muslim women in America will often wear pants and so on, just like young American women do. So they may dress that way. Now, in some countries, they're required to wear an entire outfit to completely cover themselves. And it is traditionally not been encouraged that young women even get to study. If you recall, some years ago in October of 2012, a young Pakistani woman, a schoolgirl, if you'll excuse that, riding on a bus with a bunch of other girls, a bunch of big, bad, brave Taliban soldiers will jump on that bus, big, brave, bad, notice that, and they will shoot her because she was advocating education for young Palestinian women. Muslim men tend to fear with a passion any kind of education for young women. Now, Malala, as she is known to the world, will survive. Malala has spoken to the UN. She, I believe, is still living in England right now on a scholarship to an English university. A very articulate young woman. And of course, she very much would like to make some positive changes for women in the Muslim world. Kind of watch. Be interesting to see what happens as this young woman ages and matures and continues on her quest for education for Muslim women. Okay, now, like a lot of religions we have seen, Islam has its series of taboos. Like Jews, Muslims are not allowed to eat pork. It is considered to be the most unclean of all meats out there. So are dogs. They are considered unclean. Eating of birds, beasts of prey, donkeys, mules, and so on would also be prohibited by them. Muslims are forbidden to drink alcohol in any form or gamble. Now, that doesn't mean they do not do so. They command abstinence from illegal drug use, sex outside of marriage, although, especially in Africa, Muslim gangs or vigilante groups or whatever you wish to call them will use rape as a method of intimidation upon women. But supposedly that is forbidden. They are also very anti-homosexual, and homosexuality carries a death penalty with it, as does adultery on the part of a woman. And sadly for some of us, the left hand is considered to be a tool of Satan. So those of us who are southpaws would be somewhat looked at skeptically in a Muslim society. Now, as I said earlier, the Quran does prescribe war in the name of Allah. And as I say, their enemies are anyone who threaten Islamic peace, those who persecute Muslims, and those who are what they would call polytheists. Tradition approves of violence against missionaries and those who leave Islam, and this is very true today in the nation of Iran, but pretty much any really strong Muslim nation. And let me quote just a few passages here, and then we'll look at some others later. In the Cow, 190 and 191, and fight in the way of Allah with those who fight with you, and kill them wherever you find them. In Women, 91, then seize the, I can't read my writing. Seize the non-Muslim, kill him wherever you find them. And against these, we have clear authority. Then in 110, surely the unbelievers are your often enemy. Food, 51. O you who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. Spoils of war, 65. O prophet, urge the believers to war. Repentance, 29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah. So, many people ask the question. There's been a lot of debate since 9/11 in the United States. Is Islam a violent religion? Does it teach violence? Well, we just read some samples from the Quran. So, you make up your mind. There are some who say that Muslims who practice violence are misusing the Quran. And I would question that evaluation. I would say they are following the Quran as they interpret it. Now, another question comes up. Are all Muslims violent? If you run into a Muslim in Chattanooga, are they carrying a scimitar? And if you're not careful and you look at them the wrong way, are they going to cut your throat? No, not all Muslims are violent. Why are Muslims coming to the United States? Many of them are coming for the very same reason people have been coming to the United States since colonial times. They want a new opportunity. They want a place where they can live in peace, raise their families, take care of whatever occupation they are in, and mind their own business. Many of them want to be very good citizens. Now, some can be radicalized, but not all. Now, let me tell you a little story. The Thursday after 9/11, I was taking classes at Middle Tennessee. And I had my little ritual. I would always go up in the afternoon, do some research in the library, go by the student center, get my Chick-fil-A sandwich, and eat my dinner before I went to my 6 o'clock class. Well, this particular night, when I went into the student center, all the students were sitting up near where the food was being served. The lower end, toward the main windows and everything, was empty except for one young woman. And she was wearing a veil. So that signified to everybody who and what she was. And because of the paranoia that was existing in the United States and everything, I'm sure the students were all very, very skeptical. Well, of course, at that time, I looked old enough to be a faculty member, so I got my food and I went, and I did not say a word to the young woman because that would have been totally improper. A male does not speak to an unaccompanied Muslim woman. It is just not done. You don't do that. And so I did not speak to her. I just sat down at a table near her. Well, by the time I finished and was about to leave, students had filtered in to that area. And as I got up to leave, the young woman looked at me, gave me a little bit of a smile and a nod to thank me. She was not in that eating place that night to kill anybody. She was getting her meal, probably just like me, before she went to an evening class. So do not characterize and say all Muslims are. We just shouldn't do that. All Americans are. No, all Americans aren't. All Muslims aren't. All French people aren't. All Africans aren't. And so try not to group everyone who practices a religion into one little small container. All Jews, as we have seen, are not the same. All Christians, as we have seen, are not the same. All Buddhists are not the same. All who practice Shinto are not the same. And on and on and on we could go with every religion we have covered in this semester. And so please, 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 do not just blanketly stereotype people. Now, are there radical Muslims who are bent on war and terror and other things? Yes, by all means, that is true. All the people involved in 9/11 were Muslims from Saudi Arabia. So yes, they can be involved that way. And yet there have been Muslims in Iraq who have risked their lives, their families, and everyone else they know to help the Americans try to help their country. And some of these people have wound up having to immigrate to the United States because they were no longer safe over there. But they were true and trusted friends of the American troops. And so don't stereotype a people. But can Islam be a violent religion? Yes. Has Christianity ever been a violent religion? Well, yes. There were the Crusades. And sugarcoat the Crusades as you want. Basically, they were to rob, pillage, and steal. That's what the Crusades were all about. And if you want to throw kill in there, you can, because they were very, very brutal. One of the groups that will arise during the Crusader period are the Knight Templars. And I mean, these were pure killing machines. That's what they were all about. And they were monks who had become these killing machines. So, religion can be violent. But again, let me emphasize, when religions become violent, that is the dark side of that religion, for sure. Well, basically, within a century of Muhammad's death, Islam became a unifying force for Arabs. They will claim it is an Arab religion. Judaism would be a foreign religion. Christianity would be a foreign religion. Islam would be an Arabic religion. And as your textbook says, Muslim armies conquered Palestine, Syria, Persia, Egypt, and they will sweep across North Africa all the way up into Spain, and they were actually turning eastward from Spain and beginning a conquest of Europe when in 732 they will be defeated by the Frankish king Charles Martel. By the way, Martel means hammer, at the Battle of Tours. And that will pretty much be their high point of the early conquest. Now, eventually, the prime target of the Ottoman Turks, who are Muslim, the city of Constantinople, will fall in 1453. This will end the Eastern Roman Empire. Constantinople is now known as Istanbul. Of course, it is the capital of Turkey, modern Turkey, today. So, yes, Muslim armies have conquered. Muslim armies have used warfare. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the Ottoman Turks will be responsible for the genocide of thousands of Armenian Christians. Now, Turkey denies these allegations, but they are very, very much true, and they have been proven. Okay, so as we look at this, I called Islam one of our three missionary religions. Well, as the Muslims take over the Middle East, they get involved in the trade. And so Muslim merchants will begin to go out and trade. And they will have quite an influence in sub-Saharan Africa for years and years. There will be some acceptance of Islam in China. Of course, if you study history, and as we did with India, there will be a time that the Muslims will actually conquer most of northern India. And so they have made their inroads. Islam is expanding through immigration heavily in Western Europe. And some of the Western European nations are having their own series of terrorist problems because homegrown terrorists are rising up there. Many young Muslim men are unemployed, they're disenfranchised, and as a result of that, they become very, very bitter and angry. In 2006, Muslims in France began rioting for more rights. In 2010, Angela Merkel of Germany will declare that multiculturalism had failed and Muslims should obey German laws and custom, not their own. And so there have been a flood of Muslim immigrants into the United States, and this started back during the 70s, and there are still Muslims coming into this country. And quite honestly, Islam has made a deep, deep inroad into the U.S. prison system, where you have a lot of disenfranchised young men who are more than willing to listen, at least, to the message that the Muslims have to offer. Okay, let's talk about a word you may or may not have heard, the caliphate. Now, unlike Roman Catholicism, Islam is not highly structured. Most of the duties of a good Muslim can be done at home. But there will be people who will come along who will rise up to very powerful positions within Muslim areas, and they will be called a caliph or a deputy or a representative, supposedly of Muhammad himself. And there have been several Islamic states that have arisen through history, and the caliphate has been a way of these being able to unite the Islamic people. Now, Islam would love to be a theocracy. That's a place where religion and the state are combined together. Iran is a modern example of that. To an extent, Saudi Arabia and several of the other Muslim nations are that. Okay, there were three main caliphates in history that had profound influence on Afro-Eurasia through the years. The Umayyads, who were centered in Damascus, Syria, they made actually little effort to convert others. And, of course, they were probably some of the least powerful. The Abbasid dynasty ruled from Baghdad, and it was one of the more powerful dynasties that arose. A lot of medieval science, philosophy, and literature will be taking place in this Abbasid dynasty. Remember, our Jews for a time were in Baghdad as well, or Babylon, and so a lot of influence there on their maintaining education, where Western Europe had obviously collapsed. Then we have the Turks, who ruled a Muslim empire from Egypt. They were the Mamluks, and then they will finally be replaced by the Ottoman Turks, who will actually last till the end of World War I. They will side with Germany and Austria and be on the losing side. Now, many of you have heard about the rise of ISIS. ISIS came along, and it literally wanted to establish a modern caliphate in the Middle East. And of course, if you know anything about them, you know about their extremely brutal messages. They would execute prisoners. They were brutal in battle. They were destructive. In Syria, probably one of the best sets of Roman ruins of a city were standing when ISIS went in there. And they took bulldozers, and because it was Roman, not Muslim, they took bulldozers and just destroyed an archaeological treasure. Part of their philosophy, part of their meanness, and so on. Now, contrary to what you hear. Islam is not a monolithic body. It is divided into two main divisions. And may I say, these two main divisions in some ways hate each other as much as they hate outsiders. Now, about 85% of Muslims are called Sunnis. These are the traditional Muslims. They think of themselves as the guardians of Islamic orthodoxy and tradition. The Sunnis rely on the Quran and the traditions known as the Hadith, and they say these are the words of the prophets. And so Sunnis are by far the largest group. Now, Saudi Arabia would be a primary Sunni nation. Now, I say primary, and I'll tell you why that in a minute. You have Indonesia with the largest Muslim population in the world, also being Sunni. Then you have the Shia element, and the Shiites believe that revelation did not end with Muhammad and the Quran, but that there are divinely inspired figures called imams that lead today. And an imam speaks with the authority of Allah. Iran would be an example of a nation led by a Muslim cleric, therefore an imam. And of course, obviously, if these people get up and claim to speak for Allah, there's a lot of danger, because if they get some burr under their saddle, they can get up and teach pretty much whatever they want, and of course people are going to accept that. Now, your Shias tend to be where more of your radicals are going to arise. All of the 9/11 terrorists that brought down the World Trade Center and so on, all of them were Shias. They were from Saudi Arabia, but they were Shias. Now, just a little departure, but this may help you understand some things. Following World War I, when the Turkish Empire was being carved up mainly by Britain and France, hooray, the United States didn't mess this one up, they did not take this Sunni Shia division very seriously. And so as they began to draw the various geographic boundaries in the Middle East, not taking those divisions into consideration, for example, in Iraq, you had a Sunni majority population who tended to persecute the Shias. In Iran, you had a majority Shia population who tended to persecute the Sunnis. And many, many other states had these sort of problems. And so some of that disunity and fighting that we see in the various Arab states today was brought about literally by Western ignorance, by the West not knowing what to do and how to respond and how to react and so on. And so numerous problems have been caused as a result of that. So here we have Muslim. Here we have the Islam world. This is actually kind of a good stopping point. And so we will end our class here. When we come back, we'll look at Islam in the modern world and hopefully spend a little time reading to you directly out of the Quran. So students, please continue to be safe.